Picture a visage so renowned that an entire epoch bears its name. A countenance embossed on currency, woven into tapestries, rendered on wooden panels that still command the world's premier galleries. Pale as bleached bone, smooth as molten tallow, untouched by time. Now consider that this portrait, the most duplicated in English history, is a fabrication. And consider that only a handful of living souls are aware of this truth, for they are its architects, reconstructing it each dawn with their own fingers. You are among them. It is still hours before sunrise within the royal chambers. The hearth fire has diminished to embers. The air is heavy with the chill of dead ash, the waxy scent of tallow, the stale ghost of rosewater, and beneath it all, a faint, cloying sweetness, something more putrid than any English perfume can disguise. You tread softly, for the woman veiled within the great bed does not wish to be perceived before her transformation is complete. Perceiving her before readiness is forbidden. It is the very reason for your post. You are a lady of the bedchamber. Your sacred duty, preceding the arrival of ambassadors, courtiers, and the adoring masses who come to venerate Gloriana, is to construct her. For Elizabeth Tudor, the Virgin Queen, the untouchable symbol of an empire, does not simply rise and proceed to her throne. She is fabricated, stratum by stratum, and you are the artisan holding the brush. To comprehend what lies beneath the gilding, one must journey back 40 years, to the autumn of 1562. A much younger Elizabeth lay trembling with fever in a bed much like this one, and the entire court braced for her demise. It was smallpox. For days she burned and raved, and her counsellors, in hushed tones, began to debate the succession. Yet she did not perish. She survived. And it is here that the true chronicle of her face begins. For smallpox does not leave its victim unchanged. For a period, she was rendered mute. For a time, those around her considered her already lost. One of her nurses, in her devotion, contracted the disease herself and bore far worse scars for her loyalty. Then the fever broke, the peril subsided, but the reprieve came with a cost etched into her flesh. The disease had left its indelible mark, pockmarks, craters in the skin of a young woman once deemed handsome, even beautiful. The rash crusted, healed, and left its hollows. It also ravaged her hair. Not entirely, not instantly, but enough. Enough that the woman who rose from that sickbed was no longer the one who had lain down. She had gazed into the chasm and clawed her way back. Her prize was a face she could no longer recognize. Everything that follows, the cosmetics, the perukes, the banishment of mirrors, the consuming obsession, sprouts from this single primal wound. Bear this in mind when you hear Elizabeth dismissed as merely vain. You are being told the final chapter, while the prologue where she nearly perished is omitted. So now, in the dim light of the bedchamber, you commence the restoration. You reach for the ceruse. This is the foundation upon which legends are erected, and it is worth acknowledging its true nature, for most of what you have heard is hyperbole. Venetian ceruse was a cosmetic formulated from white lead, ground to a fine powder and amalgamated with vinegar to create a smooth, luminous paste, a shade coveted by all European aristocracy. Pale skin signified freedom from labor under the sun, which meant wealth. It was the supreme fashion in the Western world. It was also, as we now know, a slow-acting poison. The lead permeated the dermis over time, and sustained use was linked to cutaneous damage, discoloration, and worse. Here, the storytellers often reach for their preferred image. The queen applying this venom in layers inches thick, the lead consuming her flesh, so she applies more to conceal the destruction, and ever more, a fatal spiral of vanity that ultimately takes her life. It is a compelling, horrifying tale. It is also, for the most part, a myth. The reality is that clear eyewitness descriptions of Elizabeth slathered in white lead are remarkably scarce. Much of this lurid narrative was fabricated centuries later, largely by the Victorians, who delighted in cautionary tales of women destroyed by their own narcissism. Did Elizabeth use ceruse? Almost certainly, particularly as the scars deepened and the years advanced. Did it contribute to her death? That is a legend masquerading as fact, and we do not traffic in legends. Still, you paint. The vinegar in the paste stings your nostrils as you work, a sharp, acidic tang that clings to your fingers for hours. You smooth the pallid hue over the pits and shadows, working it into the ravaged hollows until the damaged skin is transformed into a flawless, uniform mask. You do it because she commands it, because it is efficacious, and because a queen cannot be seen to age when her unwed body is, quite literally, the bedrock of the realm. There is no husband, no heir, there is only her. If she appears mortal, the kingdom appears fragile. So you render her immortal, one meticulous stroke at a time, and the visage is merely the commencement. Upon the white you bring colour, a crimson for the lips and the high cheekbones, so that against the deathly pallor a semblance of vitality appears to bloom. Then the eyes, the meticulous placement of shadow, until the human woman is entirely subsumed by the design. Yet even that pales beside what follows, for the queen is not truly attired until she is armoured around you. The other women now move, and the great business of the morning unfolds. The gown's layers are hauled into position, pinned and laced. The vast wired ruff is set at her throat like a halo. The farthingale transforms a frail body into a monument, and the jewels, ropes of pearl, drops at her ears, stones sewn by the hundreds into the fabric, so that when she moves, she casts light like a window. It requires a small army to construct her. Dressers, wardrobe keepers, jewel mistresses, each with their single sacred task, each sworn to the same silence. By the time she rises to greet the world, virtually nothing remains of the woman who woke shivering in the darkness. There is only Gloriana, and every soul in this room knows precisely how she was made. At the close of the long day, when the doors are sealed and the last courtier has departed, the entire ritual is reversed. The paint must be removed. The popular narrative renders this the most Gothic moment. The queen scrubbing away her mask each night with mixtures of eggshell, alum and mercury, sanding her own flesh raw. Such recipes existed, and some were genuinely harsh. The age had no shortage of dangerous beauty treatments. But once again, storytellers exaggerate beyond the evidence, transforming an ordinary evening's cleansing into nightly self-flagellation that slowly poisoned her to death. Set the theatrics aside. What is true is simpler, quieter. Night after night, the face the entire kingdom worshipped was wiped away in a curtained room, and the woman beneath was handed back to herself. She smiles at you then, to gauge her reflection in your eyes. And this is the part the paintings will never show. Her teeth are black. This is no myth, it is documented by people with no reason to flatter and every reason to gossip. In 1598, a German visitor named Paul Hentzner watched the aging queen process through her court and wrote it plainly. Her face fair but wrinkled, her hair false and red, and her teeth black, a defect he noted that the English seemed prone to from their enormous appetite for sugar. He was not the only one. The French ambassador, André Hurault, recorded that her teeth were yellow, uneven, and in places simply absent. So many missing that it made her difficult to understand when she spoke. Two foreign observers, arriving separately, both stopped and stared at the same thing. The cause was, of all things, wealth. Sugar in Tudor England was not the cheap white powder of modern cupboards. It was an imported luxury, rare and staggeringly expensive, on par with jewels and fine spices. To consume it constantly was to announce with every mouthful that you were wealthy enough to decay. Picture the banquets you have attended. Entire sculptures spun from sugar, Castles, beasts, coats of arms set before her to be admired and devoured. Fruits candied and preserved in it, cakes heavy with it. Sugar sprinkled on dishes where a modern cook would never dream. To the Tudor eye, this was not indulgence, it was power rendered edible, a way of consuming your own fortune before your rivals. Elizabeth adored it. She took sweets at nearly every meal, and in one of history's crueler ironies, she is said to have cleaned her teeth with a paste that was itself sugar-based, polishing them day after day with the very substance that dissolved them. Thus, the wealthiest woman in the kingdom smiled a black smile, and it was, for a time, the most fashionable smile in the country. You often hear that courtiers blackened their own healthy teeth to imitate her. Be cautious with that claim. It is endlessly repeated, but thinly sourced at best. What is certain is stranger and sadder. Hers rotted for real, and the world called it beauty because a queen had made it so. Now for the smell. Let us address the thing everyone whispers about.
We must not
and let us correct the greatest slander of all.
I know.
You have heard it said that Elizabeth bathed once a year, perhaps once a month, whether she needed it or not, and that this proves what a filthy age it was. Here is what almost no one tells you. That famous quote, "Whether she needed it or not," has no reliable source. No one can trace its origin. It has been passed hand to hand by lazy writers for so long that it now wears the costume of fact. Even if we take the monthly bath at face value, it does not make Elizabeth disgusting. It makes her a fanatic for cleanliness by the standards of her own century. Her successor, James, reportedly barely bathed at all. Continental kings across the Channel are said to have bathed a mere handful of times in their entire lives, because the medical wisdom of the age held that immersing the body in hot water opened the pores and invited disease. Avoiding the bath was not filth, it was cutting-edge health advice. But here is the real secret, the thing the servants understood that the storytellers miss. Cleanliness in the Tudor world did not occur in water, it occurred in cloth. The genuine hygiene technology of the age was linen. Fine white linen, worn against the skin, worn to sleep in, worn beneath every gown, and changed constantly. The theory was that clean linen drew the sweat and impurities out of the body and locked them in the weave, so that swapping a soiled shift for a crisp one was, in their minds, equivalent to washing. And so you change her linen again and again. You wipe her face, hands and body with damp cloths daily, scented with rose water and herbs. You perfume her with musk, civet and orange, sweet oils, scented gloves, not merely to smell pleasant, but because scent itself was thought to guard the body against corrupted air. Layer by layer, you seal her against the world. Clean cloth against the skin, sweet oil over the cloth, jewels and silk over everything. You keep her, by the honest measure of her own time, immaculate. When history later calls her a dirty queen, it is judging a linen civilization by the rules of a plumbing one, and getting the answer completely wrong. The wigs come next, and they are their own quiet tragedy. The high, startling hairline you see in portraits, the forehead that seems to rise forever, was fashion. Foreheads were plucked and shaved to look nobly tall. But on Elizabeth, it also hid a wound the smallpox had opened decades ago, and that age had widened ever since. Her own hair, once a famous Tudor red, had thinned, greyed and disappeared. So she wore false hair, dyed to that same defiant auburn, and Hentzner, watching her that day in 1598, saw straight through it, noting the colour was fine and the hair was false. By the end, she is said to have owned dozens of wigs. A whole wardrobe of borrowed youth, ranks of them waiting on their stands like a gathering of the queen she used to be. You are the one who fits them. You settle each one over the sparse, greying strands beneath. You pin it close so that no seam shows. You dress the curls high off the forehead and set the jewels into them, arranging the perfect illusion of a hairline where there is only scar and thinning skin. It is delicate, patient work, and it must be flawless, for a single loose pin in the wrong company could unmake the entire performance. Every morning you give her back the crown of hair the fever took away in 1562. Every night you take it off again and set it on its stand and see her without it. Because that is the thing about your position. You see her without it. All of it. You see her between the mask and the mirror. And let us talk about that mirror, for it holds the darkest and most misquoted story of them all. You will hear that in her final years, Elizabeth banned every looking-glass from her presence, unable to bear the sight of her ruined face, and that her ladies-in-waiting, taking advantage of a blind and clueless old queen, painted her cheeks and reddened her nose like a drunkard's for their private amusement. It is a grotesque little picture. It is also built almost entirely on gossip, specifically on a story the playwright Ben Jonson told in 1619, a full 16 years after Elizabeth was dead, relayed in conversation to a Scottish acquaintance by a man who was no admirer of the late Queen. 16 years, second-hand, from a hostile source. That is the entire foundation for the cruel image of mocking, nose-painting servants. The idea that the women of the Privy Chamber, women who could be ruined or worse for the smallest insolence, would dare to mock their sovereign as a joke, does not survive a moment's honest thought. So strip the gossip away, and what is left?
As the candle burns
something
low,
quieter, better
so
attested,
too do the
and far more
fade,
human.
leaving only
Several
the stark
separate
truth
accounts
of
from the
matter.
end of her life do agree on one thing. She stopped looking at herself. She turned away from her own reflection, not because her ladies tricked her, but because she could not stand to meet the eyes of the old woman the glass insisted on showing her, when the whole world outside was still bowing to a goddess who never aged. Keep the turning away, it is almost certainly true. Throw out the pantomime of the painted nose. That is theatre invented after her death. And here is where you understand your true role and why this narrative is called what it is. Because Elizabeth's vanity was never really a private weakness. It was policy. In the 1590s, as the real woman withered, her government did something extraordinary. They standardized her face. Official portraits stopped depicting her as she was and began reproducing a single approved, ageless template, a pattern historians call the mask of youth. The Privy Council worked to suppress unflattering images, to hunt down and destroy paintings that showed the truth. The Crown was, in effect, running the largest image control operation in England, retouching its queen across every canvas in the land. And you are the flesh and blood version of that same operation. Where the painters used a template, you use a brush, a wig, and a change of linen. Together, you keep two Elizabeths alive at once, the immortal one the country needs, and the mortal one who is quietly dying behind the bedchamber door. She dies in March of 1603, and even her death is wrapped in a myth we should unwrap before we finish. The tidy, satisfying story says the makeup finally caught up with her, that all those years of white lead poisoned her blood and killed the queen who had painted herself to death. It rhymes too well to resist, and so it gets repeated as fact. But the honest answer is that we do not know that, and the evidence does not support it. The woman who died in those last weeks was old, worn, and sunk in a deep melancholy. She refused food, refused her bed, refused to let her doctors examine her, and stood for hours on her feet as though sitting down were a surrender. She would not lie down. For days she stood or sat propped on cushions on the floor, one finger sometimes at her lips, staring at nothing, refusing the bed as though lying in it were an admission that the performance was over. What took her was most likely some ordinary, merciless infection, blood poisoning, or a lung sickness that carried off countless people in an age with no antibiotics. Not a cosmetic curse, just a body at last running out after 40 years of being held upright by paint and pins and the loyalty of a handful of women. To pin her death on her vanity is to let the legend write the ending, and we would rather write the true one. And so, When the last breath goes out of her, you are still there, one of the few who knew both faces. You have spent a lifetime in the narrow space between the mask and the mirror, and you carry out of that room a secret the portraits will spend 400 years trying to bury. That Gloriana had scars and black teeth and false hair and a face she could not look at. And she was, in the honest reckoning of her own century, cleaner and more careful and more disciplined than almost anyone who has ever mocked her since. Because here is what we should see when we look back at the painted queen and attempt to laugh or recoil. We should not see a vain, grotesque old woman fooled by her own servants. That woman is a Victorian invention and a modern caricature, and she was never real. We should see something much harder and much braver. A survivor of a disease that should have killed her, ruling alone in a world that expected her to fail, using every tool her century possessed. The linen, the ceruse, the wigs, the portraits, the loyal hands in the bedchamber, to hold together an image that held together a kingdom. The mask was not weakness, the mask was the job, and the people who built it every morning and dismantled it every night were not the ones who exposed her disgust. They were the ones who guarded her dignity and kept her secret and understood better than history ever has exactly what it cost to be Gloriana. That is the real dark history of Elizabeth's face. Not that it was disgusting, but that keeping it beautiful was one of the loneliest, most relentless performances any monarch has ever given, and that she gave it without intermission until the day she died.